you should talk about, perhaps the most important early formative figure for you, who is Derek Jarman, because I believe he is the person who first got you involved in film. Is that right?
He is really the reason that I'm here, because why I'm in a cinema context at all, because, and he is exactly the right place to start, because before him I was etc. school plays, going to university, performing in plays, but never, I was a writer at university. I was always going to be a writer, and I didn't take it that seriously, and I still don't really take it seriously that I'm a performer. But Derek was the first filmmaker that I met.
So how did he find you?
Very orthodox. He was casting a film called Caravaggio, and I went to see him in a completely, go and see him for a part way, and we just hit it off.
And were the early Jarman films a kind of boot camp for you, a kind of way of discovering cinema acting?
Boot camp. He also, of course, was a forces child. He made filmmakers of all of us. That was one thing I can say. And I don't mean that he necessarily made directors of us, but we worked as a group. He was a great one for putting together a group of people and then basically requiring that you all just got on with it, under his eye, of course, but it was a very, very collaborative experience. I mean, the Caravaggio, which was the first film I made with him, and for those of you who haven't seen it, there are really very precise setups in the film that are modeled very closely to the paintings, Caravaggio's paintings. I remember Grips and Sparks telling Derek that maybe the lighting wasn't quite right in a way that I've never seen since, and he was always, we all made the films together. And there were a group of us who worked with him pretty endlessly, and I worked with him for 7 films until he died 9 years after we made Caravaggio.
One of the things that strikes me, I mean, I've been cramming your films for the last few days, and it strikes me that you had a lot of opportunity in your early films to act in many scenes where the dialogue was quite sparse. And that's a rare opportunity that for a British actor to get, because so much British television, theatre, and even film acting involves huge reams of dialogue scenes.
Derek, as a painter, as a visual artist, first and foremost, and was always the first to say that he couldn't really write scripts, apart from anything else. The dialogue's pretty ropey constantly in Derek Jarman's films. Who cares? The pictures are beyond, and there's something so much more than people being articulate in that literary way. And apart from anything else, several of the films that I made with Derek Jarman are completely silent. And Derek, there were sort of haute couture and pret-a-porter films. I don't know, you'd have to decide which for you was which with Derek. There was the 35mm films, which we would make once every, 2 or 3 years. There was Caravaggio, The War Requiem, Edward II, and Wittgenstein. And then in between, we would make these experimental films, the first of which, the first feature film was The Last of England, and then there was The Garden. But there were these other experimental films like Imagining October, which was Super 8 blown up to 35mm, which of course are completely silent. And so the performance element, which by the way you could never call acting, because it really is like a documentary film of our lives, it's a dress up, really. Nothing more sophisticated than my 10-year-old twins do. They were completely silent films, so the performance element was always about being unwatched and being filmed being unwatched.
Can you imagine ever having a relationship like that with another film director?
I can, because if I said I couldn't, then that would just be too depressing for words. I mean, I can't imagine having a relationship exactly like that, because, relationships are unique, and we had a very unique friendship. But one of the great blessings for me of recent years, since he died, because, when he died, it was a bit of a shock for me. I mean, not a shock, because we kind of knew he was dying. But here's the thing. When he died, lots of things died, kind of coincidentally. There was a moment of, culturally, that really ended at that moment. And there was a political shift. And there was a whole way of making films that was really impossible for us after that. You know, the BFI production arm was disbanded, and the lottery, there was time before the moment when films were funded through the lottery system. The UK Film Council didn't exist. Or the whole way of putting films together in this country changed radically. And I have to say, I find it very strange because I live really in an alien situation now, because I live in the far north of Scotland. I have 10-year-old twins, and when they were born, I went to live in the far north of Scotland, and I really have almost nothing to do with London anymore. So my access to the filmmaking in London, in particular, is really cauterized. I don't really know. You'd have to tell me what's going on. I come here probably less than anywhere. And I'm sad about that, because, I'm sad that way of making films has well, let's say, optimistically it'll rise again, but it's become very difficult.
Let's think about the Chronicles of Narnia, shall we? Here you have incarnating a powerful figure from the childhood memories of probably most of the people in this room. I mean, some, a subject of some weight to take on in that sense.
Yeah, but although happily not me, because I'm in a minority, I think, of
never
one.
read them?
No, I was not. I was an infidel. No, I was not subjected to them when I was a child, and I really hadn't read them. I've only read a couple of them now. My children have read more than I. And when Andrew Adamson first talked to me about it, I hadn't read them at all, which was quite good.
Because how did you come to be cast for that?
He wanted me to do it. It wasn't my idea. It was Andrew Adamson just had this bugbear that he wanted me to do it, and he wouldn't go away. And so, and I really, really liked him. He was such a dude, and I would have made that film with him, really, if he had made it in a garage. I went to see him, and he just talked such a good picture. And because I didn't know the book, I had nothing to compare it. I just went, that's a film I want to see, and you want me to help you make it? I'm in. And you want to go to New Zealand to do it? Sweet, It was fantastic.
Were you at all worried, I don't suppose you were, but were you at all worried about being typecast as a villain from that point onwards?
No. No, not at all. Should I be? No.
How many villains have you played since?
Well, they're all villains, aren't they? Let's face it, and they're all deeply good.
One of the things I've really enjoyed in your sort of latter-day career is some of the brief cameos you've had. I'm not going to show them, but I loved the Angel Gabriel and Constantine, which must have been huge fun to do.
Great fun.
And a little bit of echoes of Jarman in the middle of this
completely
weird
completely.
CGI
But don't you
movie.
think the Narnia film's a bit like a big Jarman film?
Maybe, I'm not sure. I saw that on a plane.
Totally.
I'm sorry, I haven't seen it properly.
Well, one of the reasons that I was attracted to doing the Narnia films in the first place was because Derek always used to tell me about an experience of standing on a subway or a bus in New York with standing next door to this little old lady and being struck to the heart with terror in his 40s and not understanding why. And then it was only when she got off the bus and she was walking along, he looked out the window and he saw her profile, and it was that woman who played the Wicked Witch of the West in the Wizard of Oz, which was his favourite film. And I know he was, when I was asked to do this, I know he was saying, do it for me. He is a great one for iconic witches.
And I totally love your biker chick in Broken Flowers. A
well,
real shock.
It's
the
nothing.
door opens and you're there. And
There's nothing like a cheap wig when you need it.
Absolutely.